Before, my name is Bree Dunscombe, and so we're on the second of a three-part series about helping produce website content and thinking about strategy and how to produce content that will be helpful to your students. So today we're talking not as high level as we were last time, but more about how you can put useful content together and how that can look and scheduling it and all those fun things. And so, topics for today, covering again what is useful content, just a brief revisit of that, talking a lot about blogs and how those can be really helpful in putting out a lot of content in real time that doesn't have to live in your navigation. We'll talk about popular kinds of blog posts that you'll see online, ways to generate some ideas, how you can reuse that blog content for other content pieces that you might have so that that's not going to waste or just sitting online. Kind of putting a blog post strategy together. And I don't think many, if any of you guys have blogs right now, so what do you do until you have a blog, or what if you can't get one up and running? How can all these ideas work with the content channels that you already have? And then the resource that I'm offering you guys today was not created by me, but it's a content calendar template that I use in my job every day. I have 6 different blogs that my content team is responsible for, and so we actually use this template every day, so I can talk very knowledgeably about how we brainstorm content and how we use that calendar. So before we get started, are there any questions that are lingering from the last session that anybody thought about since the last time we met, or any feedback or thoughts you wanted to share for doing the evaluating your sitemap, if there was any feedback on that? Sure.
Ours worked really, really well. I used similar template to what you had made, but basically just extrapolated from the PowerPoint just all the questions and prioritizing and tasks, and then gave them a chart to fill out. And it was very focused. I gave them all just a page to each staff member, so there was lots of stakeholders, lots of inclusiveness and fresh eyes, but it was a really manageable task for each person to do in a timely manner.
Good.
And then I've met with each one of them, and then we just sit down, they tell me what to fix, and it worked out really well.
Good,
We covered
good.
a lot of ground in a very, very short period of time.
Great, and again, that template isn't the end-all be-all, so I'm sure everyone could find ways to include more questions or look at different parts, so I'm glad to hear that was helpful. Good. Anybody else have anything to add? Good, well, thanks for sharing that. Okay, so I should have pulled this slide up when I talked about all the different content. Offer this content calendar at the end of the session, and this has become one of my most used things in my day job. And we have one calendar for each blog that we do, and it sets the tone for how we write and who's going to write and what ideas we have. So again, this is a resource that you guys now have at your disposal, so we'll talk more about that at the end. But this definitely solved a problem for me. I needed a way to keep track of my content month to month, and also something that archived what we did so we could look back 6 months from now and see the types of content that we put out if we wanted to repurpose any of that. And so this template has been a lifesaver for me. And so it's also a good example that useful content doesn't always have to be blocks of paragraphs. It can look in it can look differently. So that's one of my favorite things that I go back to. This is more of a blog post, and so this helped me make a decision. As a freelancer, I needed to figure out if I wanted to formally incorporate in some way, or if I just wanted to be a sole proprietor and use my social security number when I was accepting payment for new jobs and things like that. And so I wasn't sure what the pros and cons were of being a sole proprietor or becoming an LLC. So this was an article that really helped me think about how to make that decision. So again, I actually did bookmark this because I've gone back over time to see if the criteria has changed, deciding at what point if I ever want to become an LLC, but this was a very useful piece of content for me that helped me make a tangible decision about how to move forward in my career. And then third thing, this is a blog post. Not sure if anybody is familiar with The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. She's one of my favorite blogs. And so here's an example of a blog post that I would categorize as helping me to get better at something. And so, lists are a very popular form of blog posts these days. And so 14 writing tips from Anne Lamott. The list is a mix of high-level things just to keep in mind as you're planning writing, and also, tactical ways to kind of plan your schedule out and sit down and write. This is a good example because it also shows that content that you share doesn't always have to be original from you. You can summarize content that has helped you or taken from other places, compile lists from different sources beyond just yourself, and put that together. So it could have been 14 writing tips from the author herself, and she decided to bring in another resource. And so again, it's just showing that it doesn't always have to originate from you. So again, I would encourage you to think about the kind of content that has served to be useful in your own job and in your own professional life, and think about how it's been useful. What did it help you do? How did the writing speak to you? Or again, was it something that wasn't just blocks of paragraphs? Are there templates or calculators or other types of tangible things that you need to help you do something that you found online? So having that kind of mindset when putting content together for students, I think can be really helpful. Blogs and their role in providing useful content. So this was a section that was fun for me to write because I blog personally, I blog professionally, and have had different gigs in that way. So this is a fun thing for me to talk about. First of all, in terms of the formal definition of blog, sometimes it can be hard to be on a website and tell if it's a blog or a website, and I don't really know that matters. But most of them will follow some kind of journal style where you'll see multiple posts that have a date stamp on them, and it will start from the newest blog post, and then it will funnel down to the oldest, so that you're getting that new content at the top of the homepage. And so blogs are a wonderful way to get useful content out to people. And here are some reasons why. First of all, it's search friendly. So we talked last time about the importance of wanting your content to be found easily when people are looking things up in Google. Google indexes all blog content and websites the same, so blogs will come up in search results. So the benefits of forming an LLC that I showed you, again, that was just a blog post that Google knew I wanted to see based on the keywords that I was searching for. Those same keywords were in the blog post. So you can optimize a blog post. You can for search terms that you want to be known for. You can put them in your title, you can put them in your URL, you can add them in your blog copy. So a search engine will know that that's relevant for a student if you are each using the same words. Easy to use content management system, and I believe you folks are using a content management system to upload the content you already have for the microsites that you have. Blog programs these days are designed to be super user friendly so that you don't have to have a tech background in order to use them. It has the WYSIWYG editor, the what you see is what you get, which mimics Word, and so you can style your blog post, you can format it the same way that you would a Word document without having to learn a lot of new software. You can also embed other things besides just words into your content. You know, obviously adding pictures. You could drop in a graph or a chart. There's a program called SlideShare these days that's essentially, you know, a resource for PowerPoints. You can embed that code into a blog post so people could look through a SlideShare presentation without ever having to go to SlideShare. They could do it right within your blog post. So there's a lot of different ways that you can put content into a blog and have it be useful to somebody. You can add categories to blog posts so that if there was a university college blog, for example, and you wanted to tag any post that had to do with student orientation, you can categorize each blog post as such that you can go to the orientation category and see all the posts that are like-minded together, so a student doesn't have to sort through pages of navigation or scroll down through pages of blog content and try and make the connections. There are workflow options so that you don't have to post live. You can have, there can be an admin and then there can be contributors, so that if you're a contributor, you can have somebody reviewing the content before it's published to kind of just as another set of eyes and manage that process. If you're not going to be in the office and you want something to post 2 weeks from now, you can schedule a blog post to do that for you, so you don't have to do it in real time. We do that all the time in my job. So there's lots of different ways that you can manage your content on time that works best for you, so that you're not a slave to the software. It's community oriented, so you can get feedback from people. You can have comments. You can have multiple authors on the same blog, so you can get different points of view. And it's very shareable. You don't want to just rely on Google to index the content when a student's finding it. I know that you have had social media presentations to help you communicate with students. You know, any new content that you put out, you would share on the social media channel, whether it's Facebook or Twitter. You can include pictures on Facebook when you're promoting the blog post, but it's very easy to take the link or take a picture from the blog post and share that with other people. If you have your archives, I think this is one of the most beneficial reasons to use a blog versus adding a lot of pages to your static navigation, is that all of that content can live exactly as it is, and that content doesn't have to be updated because it has the timestamp. So it's showing the student this was true at September 4th, 2013. And so if there's a change made on October 4th related to an event, you can just write a new blog post and put that out into the universe, as opposed to, again, like trying to think, okay, where was that page in my navigation? I need to write that down so I remember to update that over time. And so we talked in the last session about wanting to have content that can live for a long period of time in your navigation, but we all have real-time events and short-term information that's very useful but may not be appropriate for the navigation. So a blog is a great way to get that content out so that you're not having to pick between one or the other. And if you find blog content that you've put together has use longer than a couple of months, then that's something that you could see about working into other parts of either your website or into other content channels. But that content is always there for you to go back to and see what else and see how else it can be used. So archives are a wonderful feature. And one of the best things is that it's free. You can get pretty fancy. You can buy fancy URLs and pay a designer to do a really nice design for you, but these days you can really take the tools at your disposal, or if the CMS that you're already using with University College, it sounds like that has built-in blog features that you could already use. You're not having to pay extra fees to just get content out to students. And even personally, if you were creating a blog on your own, you could go to WordPress.com or Blogspot or Blogger, and you could create your own blog within 5 minutes and get going. So it's an easy thing to get up and running. And so there are a couple of different options, in my opinion, that the folks at University College would have. One could be to have a blog on your particular microsite that you manage. But I think that when blogging is not your full-time job, it can be really hard to it can be hard to make time for that in addition to your other responsibilities, especially if you're a staff of 1 or 2. So another suggestion could be University College having its own website or having its own blog, and everyone can contribute to that blog, so that you're not feeling such a burden to put out a post a week or 2 posts a week or whatever schedule you might decide to do, that you all can work together on and share the load on that. And if there's content that makes sense to filter into your microsite, you can do that, but it gives everyone a starting point to work from. And so if one department has a bigger need for regular content than another department, everyone can have their needs met without placing too much of a burden day to day. And of course, you would never want to create a blog without letting Eric know that you want to do that, and figuring out what guidelines you might have to keep in mind when you're doing that.
No, we like to surprise them.
Any questions about that? Pretty basic. So I went back to the Happiness Project. This looks like a full-blown website that you might create, but this is actually a blog that she hosts herself on WordPress, and she has hired a designer to give her a nice new template, but she didn't always have that. She started out just doing this on her own, and I thought this is just a great example of, I guess, the types of bells and whistles that you can have with the blog if you want to build up to that. You can see that she's got a banner that makes it look, it looks like a professional website, and she has different categories. She's got an about page, a book section, videos, tips and quizzes, so different types of information. She also has calls to action, which we talked about in the first session, where in the top left corner, she's got a yellow subscribe button because she wants you to subscribe to her newsletter. And so the blog is one of the ways that she can gather people on her list and let them know about new projects that she's got going on. She's got a comment section. She's got the timestamp on the entry, 45 comments on this blog post. She put some of those share buttons so that people can share right from the blog post and not have to log into Twitter or Facebook in a separate browser, so making that content very shareable. She's got a search function in the top right corner that you see on almost every website, above the blue bird, so you can search her website. You can search her blog just like you would a website, but this is a very simple structure on the CMS for the content management system, because we use WordPress in my job as well. And essentially these are all just different pages within the CMS that she has decided where in the hierarchy they should fall on the website, but it's not fancy. And so it's again, so just talking about how great a blog can look and how professional it can look, if you want to take it that far.
Bree?
Yes.
On WordPress, can multiple people create their own profiles, and then you have one blog where they can all contribute to? So I mean, it can kind of do like user management.
Yep.
And that way everybody has their own username and password. But
Yep. You can set permissions. So I know within our job, I'm an admin for our blog, and I think there are 2 others, so that we are the only ones who have permission to write a blog post and publish it on our own. Everyone else has a different level of permission, so it might be a contributor. They would have their own login. They would be able to get to a new blog post window, input their content, and then there's a button that says submit for review or submit for workflow. And then in theory, we're supposed to get the admins would get alerts to say that there's a new blog post waiting. Sometimes a spam filter grabs it before we can get there, but we're in those blogs every day, so we can see if it will show us in our window if there's a draft that's sitting in there that we need to review. So you can have control and inputting in there, but you don't have to be the last stop if there's work that needs to be done.
I do a community website that is actually a WordPress blog. I didn't create it, but I maintain it. And one of the nice things about it is that there's very little investment to it. We did pay for a particular theme, one-time charge.
Sure.
Some templates and some looks and so on. But other than that, you don't have to purchase whatever the current incarnation of Dreamweaver is, or a similar expensive editor, yet you've got most of the functionality and the professional flashing lights and so on of a full website.
Right, and I'm not sure, so I'm a big fan of WordPress, but this isn't necessarily why I love WordPress and why you should blog on WordPress. I'm not sure if WordPress would integrate into the software that is already being used for University College, but yes, I think it's great. And they also have a lot of public plugins that are shared within the community. So if you want a certain feature added to your website or to your blog, you can literally just look it up and install it on your blog. We've done that with a lot of the features that we have, and so I think the only thing that we pay for as a company is we do pay for WordPress to host our site, because our websites are so big. So we pay for that. We pay to have that space, but that's the extent of it. Everything else we can do in-house or looking up with the free resources that WordPress offers us. And so I would imagine other content management systems would do that too, to some extent, but WordPress is definitely the most popular one today. So, but again, you might have one already, a blog feature that is already built within your CMS that you would use, and it would probably be similar to WordPress.
Well, and that was my question, was because we do have that functionality within the site, but with any CMS trying to mimic multiple applications like that, they can be not as robust as something you could get as a third party. What are your views on, we have the University College website as well as all the microsites, but say we wanted to have a University College blog in a WordPress, would that be weird?
I don't think so. I think there are lots of sites, lots of big companies that probably maintain their main website on one platform and filter the blog from WordPress into another. I don't want to get too technical, but you could use a URL redirect. So if it were to say something like uc.iupui.edu/blog, that could be a vanity URL. Essentially, you would buy that, and people could type that URL into the search engine or into the web browser, and it could go to universitycollege.wordpress.com, so that you so I don't think that it's weird at all. I think it just depends on, I guess, if you're trying to build traffic for the UC website, it might make sense to have it integrated in already, but I think if you're just trying to get information to students and the search is secondary, which very well could be since your group is geared towards current students, if the goal is to get the information to them, WordPress could be a really good way to just get it off the ground. And if you ever decided to make a change, you can always export a blog from one content management system into another. So I don't think that you should feel limited by what you're starting out with. If you just want to test it out and see how it works, maybe that's how maybe it's a beta trial that you try with WordPress and see how it goes for 6 months. But it's very easy to use. Another thing, I'm gonna switch slides here. So blogs and their role in providing useful content, types of blog posts. So it can be hard to think of ideas for blog posts if you're not writing all the time, but there are a few types that you'll see. There are all kinds of different websites that are types that come up time and again that you can start out with. There are how-tos that can walk you through how to do something in your day-to-day, help work through a rut. Lists are probably, I would say, the most popular type of blog post that you'll see, because they're easy to scan, and we've talked about the importance of content that is quick to read for a student, so they don't feel like they're looking at the page and that they have to spend a lot of time on it. A list also indicates that there's a beginning and an end, so it shows that you have a certain path that you're going to walk a student down, and that there's going to be a logical order to that. And it's easy because you can take big ideas and break them down into small chunks. So lists are a great type of blog post to write. Comparing and contrasting two things. Again, we do accelerated nursing programs, so that means they can take for my company, it's taking a 4-year bachelor's of nursing degree that you would do as a traditional student, and it's towards working adults. So you could do the same program in 18 months because essentially you're getting credit for the gen ed courses that you've already taken. But a lot of people are a little intimidated by the idea of a faster program, and also lecture courses are online. So one of the comparisons that we make all the time is online learning versus traditional classroom learning, and comparing and contrasting the pros and cons to each, so that students can see where they fit and if it's a learning style that they might be interested in. So comparing and contrasting two different things is good. News, like just sharing things that are interesting within the industry, within your department, whether it's changes to staff or upcoming events, changes to policies and procedures, anything that might help a student get to know your department better that they would need in their day-to-day life. So just sharing that kind of campus news in general. Newsjacking, it's a funny word, media jacking. It's essentially piggybacking onto events or pop culture things that are already in the news and connecting it to your content in some way. So I'm in marketing and PR, and I see this all the time. One of the ones I can think of off the top of my head is when James Gandolfini died from The Sopranos. I saw there was a post that said 10 PR lessons you can learn from The Sopranos. So it's a good search strategy, because if people are looking up things about James Gandolfini or The Sopranos, our blog post or that blog post could come up in a search result. So it's a way to get found easier if you're making connections to things that are already in the news. But it can also be pretty fun and entertaining if it's done well. So it could hold a student's attention, and that could just be a trial and error type of process of deciding what types of connections you might be trying to make. And events you might be trying to connect yourself to, but so that's a fun one. And then roundups. It's a really straightforward thing, but essentially it's an entry that's just sharing links to different pieces of information. So I almost think about it like something that you might do at the end of the week. Here are 6 links that you might want to read over the weekend, and it could be a mixture of campus news, highlights of previous blog posts, or content that you read in the industry that might be interesting to them. So again, more of a straightforward resource that you could offer to students. There are tons and tons of types of blogs, but these are ones that are easy to wrap your head around when you're trying to format your blog post. And we'll talk more about that when I get into the example slides. Generating great blog content is definitely a concern that everyone has when they have a blog, but really it's all about answering questions. And so these are just kind of the 2 questions I put out there. If you're trying to think about topics to write about, what questions are your students asking you, and what do you know that they don't and that they should? So I think a few of your sites have FAQs. That's always a great place to start. In fact, even just making sure that you have one, you could take a look at your microsite and create a list of 50 FAQs that if they're not there, they could be, or you could build content around. And that could be a great way to start thinking about content that you could incorporate in a blog or in other parts of your website. And sometimes one question can be broken down into 3 or 4 questions. So just letting yourself kind of free write for a little bit, and if students are popping into your office, what types of things are they asking you? If you were to look at the search analytics for Google, what types of words are people typing into search engines that they want to know more about? What do you know, what's information that a student should have that they don't even know to ask you? Are there changes to events or policies that is not top of mind for a student? Or what types of things change every year? So is there a policy that gets touched 2 or 3 times? Or are there certain events that are standing on the calendar that you can promote every year, and how that event has changed over time? So really just looking at the types of things that you're already sharing with students and building content around that. Let's see. So I have a couple of example slides for you that I took from the UC website. And so the first thing I did was I went and looked at your rotating homepage images and saw this one for Study Skills Bootcamp. So I thought the first thing I would do would take an event, and if I wanted to promote that event on my blog, how would I go about doing that? So this is an event series on campus that you're trying to promote, you're trying to get attendance for. So here are examples of building blog content for that. So we have a list of 10 things, and I could have kept going, but we stopped at 10. And again, so if we're talking about calls to action, all of these posts would have a call to action for click here to sign up for our Study Skills Bootcamp session, or the next one that's coming up. So 5 things you'll learn in a Study Skills Bootcamp. So we're working our list into there, but again, it's calling attention to information that you want to make sure a student would know. So you can highlight the types of things they would learn if there are tangible skills that they'll walk away with, what the sessions are about because you have multiple sessions, things of that nature. So just taking the basic information that you probably already have on a flyer or in an email and writing a blog post around that. Number 2, how to form a study group. So this is a higher level blog post that would have a longer shelf life over time, but it still connects to that event and it would still have the same call to action. So a blog post could talk about, how, when you're forming a study group, how big would the group be? How do you know if someone's a good fit for your study group? Where do you meet? How do you pick good meeting places? How often should you meet? How do you know if a member isn't working out? So this is just taking the topic of studying from a high level and offering them information that would be valuable to them. And then at the end it can tie into your event. If you want to learn more about how to study in groups, session 3 covers that. Click here to sign up for our session. So these posts, you'll see that the majority of these posts aren't talking about the event itself. It's offering information that is more valuable to the student at a higher level, or could be useful to someone who's not even at IUPUI, is from another college or another type of program. So number 3, 5 myths about studying, debunked. So that's a popular type of blog post. So what do students believe about studying that either isn't true anymore? So I can't study if I don't have an iPad, or I can't study well with an iPad, could be an example. Taking things that students might believe or that you don't want them to believe, and giving them the information that you want to have. And then again, the call to action. If you want to learn more about study myths or whatever the topic would be, we talk about that in session 4. Click here to sign up for this session. Number 4, who should sign up for Study Skills Bootcamp? So this is one that is specific to the event, and this goes back to one of the slides that I showed you in the first presentation. There was an example from Marian University that was for the learning, and I think it was at the counseling center page, and it talked about reasons that you might want to visit our office. So this can be the same type of thing, is kind of breaking down the profile of the ideal attendee for your boot camp. So someone who, you didn't learn how to take good notes in high school. You don't know how much time to allow to study for a test. You don't know how to incorporate handwriting your notes with your iPad, like spelling out different scenarios that students might be dealing with these days when they're studying, and offering some tips in a blog post like this, or creating a profile of a student who should be signing up for the boot camp so that they can recognize themselves. 5, 10 apps to help you study. Technology and trends are huge, and we have seen this a lot with the blogs in our nursing programs. We have one that, 12 apps for nursing students that has been off the charts for one of our schools. So posts about the technology that students are already using is huge. So picking out apps that students could help them to study, whether it's helping them manage their time or other things like that, could help them figure out how to use technology when they study. And again, even if you don't have a session that ties into technology with the boot camp, you could still say for more useful tips, sign up for a session. So the call to action can still be the same, you're just getting there in different ways. Number 6, quiz, what's your study style? We've used quizzes a few times in the jobs that I've had. Something like this could be a really good thing for a student to do before they come to a boot camp. So helping them identify, when they like to study alone versus in a group, computer versus paper when it comes to note taking, helping them identify certain things about their study style, so that they can have a good feel of that before they come into a session. 7 signs that your study skills are rusty. So if there are bad habits that a student has that you want to try and break with these sessions, you can call attention to some of them. And again, it's just helping the student identify whether they're a good fit for your event. So if they see themselves in this list, maybe they would consider signing up for a session if they weren't going to before. So if there are study habits that you want to discourage, or bad habits like you can't read your own notes a week later, or you depend too much, you don't take your own notes and you depend on Cliff's notes. Like there are different types of things that you could do in here. Number 8, what Harry Potter can teach you about studying. So this is an example of that newsjacking, media jacking type blog post that I talked about before. Taking something that's popular and working it into your own content plan. So I actually typed in to see if there were posts like this, and I found just one that I thought had some interesting ideas. So it talked about, I'm not sure how many Harry Potter fans we have in the room, but you could hold up Dumbledore's army as an example of people studying in groups. or Hermione needing a time turner in book 3 as an example of setting a good schedule for yourself and not overbooking yourself because we don't have time turners in real life. So it's really something to be fun with, and again, it can tie back to with a call to action to attend your event. But posts can be fun and still be informal or informational. So, maybe it's Harry Potter, maybe it's the Hunger Games or whatever trend that you can hear students talking a lot about that has a wide reach. So you could definitely have fun with that. Number 9, beyond boot camp, how to incorporate good study habits into your everyday life. This would be an example of a post that you would, is the only example of a post that may not filter as a call to action to the study session, because into the boot camp study sessions, because you would be able to take what you learned in those sessions and then put it into a blog post. And so maybe the call to action would be, and again, this is depending on what resources were used, but download the session here if it was taped and you're giving access to it for students, or we have a recording of session 3, download that podcast here, or if there are, download this template that was shared in the session. So if you want to make information available to students after the boot camp session is over, you can offer some of those resources, and then the next time you offer this series, maybe you'll have sparked more interest to a wider group of students once they see the types of things that they could have walked away with. And then number 10, that link roundup, 7 blog posts to help you improve your study skills. You can go back to all of the blog posts that are right here that don't specifically talk about the event and just write a couple of quick lines about them. Just a way to get that information out to students again. So that's just an example of taking one event and trying to find 10 different blog posts that you could write about that. And these can be, the number is arbitrary. If you only have 3, that's fine. If you have 25, you could write 25 and break it up into a blog post series. Offer 1 through 12 on Monday and offer 13 through 25 on Thursday. So it just depends on how much steam you think you have for a particular blog post. But it's a good place to start. Any questions about any of that? Okay, so the next thing I did was I took one of the microsites that University College hosts and built content around that. So I picked orientation services. Is there anyone in here from orientation services? Oh, good, great. Well, then you can let me know.
We'll see what you have to say.
Yeah. So I actually picked 12 ideas here because I couldn't stop myself. So I kind of crammed some things in. So inside the first day of student orientation. So you can break down what the schedule looks like for them, how they're going to be spending big chunks of time, if they're moving from a lot of different buildings or activities, but giving them a picture of what their daily calendar would look like in the event. Number 2, 5 orientation resources to guide you through your first semester. Are there handouts that you're giving them? Are there graphs or charts or tangible things that they get as part of the orientation process? You can explain what those things are in a blog post. You can link to them so they can download them right then and there. Or if there's a page on the orientation website where all of this content lives, you can just link them right to that one page. Number 3, 10 Facebook groups for international students. This could just as easily have been 5 Pinterest boards or 6 Twitter feeds, but if there are social media resources that you're aware of that can that make sense for a like-minded group of students to have together, you can write about that. And again, calls to action for these things can either be to download a tangible resource or to visit your microsite or to pick up the phone and call you if they have a question. It just depends on where you want to drive their behavior. Number 4, a Q&A, how UC's orientation director can help you prepare for your first day of college. That's a long title, but that can be a great post at the beginning of the year as students are getting to know your staff, or if you've had a staff change, or if there's a different position that has more touch points with students that you want to highlight. But it can be an interview with that person talking about, so what do you do in your day-to-day, and what are good questions that you get from students? What questions do you wish students were asking you? Where can students find you? What events are you part of on campus? How can students help? So whatever, so it can really look however you want it to look. Again, and it's just a nice way to break up content that's not big heavy blocks of paragraphs. Number 5 people that can make or break your college orientation. So that can be, let's say it's so people who can help your experience along. That could be people in your staff that you want to highlight, or if they have mentors outside of the department that you want to make sure that they're in touch with. Maybe it's someone in financial aid to make sure that their tuition and financial arrangements are all taken care of. People that can break your college orientation. If there are types of people that would be a bad influence on a student, you could call attention to that. But again, just making a fun kind of list about that. Number 6, first year problems, freshmen versus transfer students. So this can be an example of that compare or contrast idea that we talked about before. Just to give an idea of the different types of issues that different groups of students may have different, but also may have in common. And so, especially within that first year, because that can be such a critical year for retention. Number 7, 25 things you didn't know about student orientation. Again, there might be little known facts that don't always get well publicized on campus events or very easily get forgotten from a student's mind. You can call attention to that, and again, the number is arbitrary. It's just, it could be 15, it could be 50, whatever things you want to make sure a student knows, and these don't have to be long. It could be 2 or 3 sentences per line. Your whole department could work together in putting that list together so it's not falling on the burden of just one person. Blogs are really meant to be collaborative. You shouldn't feel like you're doing it in a vacuum, especially when you have a team of people that could be helping you within your department. Number 8, fall orientation events you don't want to miss. This is a blatant plug for whatever calendar you might have if you want them to be aware that the calendar has been updated or changed. So if there are, fall orientation events could be a great post to have out right now so that students can start adding events on their calendar. You could create a blog post for each individual event as you get further into the year. Number 9, 6 ways to involve parents in your college orientation. This type of blog post could really take any other secondary audience that you have to deal with. I think a lot of the times it's parents, so that you can address the issue without always writing directly to the parent. Because so maybe some of your helicopter parents are going to be reading this blog, or maybe it can help a student frame how they would talk to their parents. So, be supportive when they drop you off. Don't call they shouldn't be calling your professor to check in on your grades. So you can kind of make that list be whatever you want it to be, but the point would be to show an appropriate level of involvement for whatever support group a student has, or if there are other members of the family who want to help and they're not sure, you want to just set the proper boundaries for what a student should do versus the parent should do. Number 10, how orientation kept me from flunking my first year of college. So this, I've got it in quotes because it's, I'm thinking of a student post, like a guest post. So these don't all have to be from faculty and staff. If you have student workers, if you have enthusiastic volunteers or people from the English department, or if there are other people that can help you put some personal stories out there that a student could relate to in that same situation. Talking about how how different people in the orientation office helped them stay on track or led them to the right resources, or whatever helped them to make their college experience successful. A student could write in their own voice. It wouldn't be anything that you would have to dress up. You would certainly review it, but I would say you can make minor grammar and style changes that is essentially the student talking in their own voice, and somebody that your audience could relate to. So again, thinking about other people beyond just your staff that could help you put blog content out. Number 11, 4 freshman placement tests you might not need to take. I call this a negative spin blog post, but it's not really negative. It's just helping bring different information to the forefront. So if there are lots of questions about the types of placement tests a student might need to take, you could put, it might be easier to talk about what they don't need versus what they do, because what they do could be a much bigger window. So it's just a way to add a little bit more focus to the content. It's a smaller list, probably a smaller list, so it would be easier to do. Then student poll, advice I wish I'd taken in my first year of college. And again, I know that you guys have had presentations on social media before, so this is a great way to involve social media and use it to help you write blog content. We have done things like that in my programs, and not everyone is chatty, but to get the conversation started, we did a blog post, 5 signs that you're a nursing student. And so we put that question on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram to get stories that we might not have from our own perspective. And so we took the feedback that we got. We didn't list anybody's names, but we would say one Twitter follower said, or one Facebook fan said, and kind of incorporated that. So it's a way for students to see themselves in your content and to show that you take their feedback seriously, that it's feedback that you can do something with. And you can, number 12, you could accomplish in other ways outside of social media. I mean, you could do SurveyMonkey or something more formal, but I think people are at social media anyway, so it's just a place to ask them questions where they already are. So you might, as opposed to a survey link going into their email. It's also a chance to ask for clarification. So on our Facebook page, somebody, when we asked the question about first year or signs that you're a nursing student, somebody said something like that you're well versed in in-home care, and we didn't really know what they meant by that because that wasn't a standard thing that we were saying to our students. So we were able to go onto social media, didn't have to go to their page, just went to our comment section and said, hey, that sounds great, can you explain that a little bit more? And the person wasn't even a nursing student, she owned a nursing home, and said, we hire nursing students a lot because they add a certain vibe to the place and they make our patients happy. So it was a way to get feedback beyond just the group of students that we had in our database, and just put another idea out there for students. So social media is definitely, it can also be a great place to see if you want to get feedback on a post. We're thinking about writing advice I wish I'd taken in my first year of college. Who do you know that has a great story? Who should we be talking to? So it doesn't even have to be asking them the question, but you can use that as a way to get more resources for the blog content that you are writing. Or we have a call for student blog writers. Are you interested? And you obviously could set criteria around that, but you can really use social media in a lot of different ways to help with your blog content. So not scary stuff. Okay. Setting your blog post strategy. This is where I think it's really important to be collaborative. And here are 5 different things to keep in mind. You want to recruit writers. Know on your team who is going to be helping with blog content. You might not be able to assume that everybody can, or you might have one person that's more enthusiastic than another. Again, this is where if you had one university college blog, you don't have to deplete as many of your resources. So if there's a department of 5 and you've got 2 people who want to help, it's better to encourage the people who already want to do it. You will probably have greater success than trying to drag somebody who doesn't have any interest in it, especially since it's essentially a volunteer activity that a staff member is doing with their time. Setting a publishing schedule, and that's what the calendar I had can help you do, and so I can talk more about how we use that. Establishing workflow, and so this would go with the content management system, but also so who has permission to publish live? Is there a department that's going to be an admin, or does that all funnel through a different office? Have someone else outside of your department read your work for you. Who's that going to be? You can swap services so that there's a second pair of eyes, but know who that person would be going in. How much time does someone need to review or publish a post? It's not great to send someone a post at 9 a.m. and tell them that you'd like it to go live in 2 hours. So allowing a couple of days time for someone to review your work. Identifying search keywords and include them when applicable. Again, you're writing for a human, not for a search engine. So the goal is not to use the phrase as many times as you possibly can. But in analytics, it said that students typically type in fall orientation schedule when you're writing posts about that. Using that phrase once or twice to help them find it in a search engine. Use pictures or other visuals. Blogs really need pictures. Blogs need something else besides just the content, and you can see that when you're sharing it on social media. So if you were to upload something to Pinterest, for example, which is a visual pin board, and you don't have a blog post, you don't have a picture in your blog post, it loses some of the oomph that a student would see when it's on your board. Or you might be able to upload one on your own, but it's just nice for you to assume that you have to have something visual going with your content.
Bree?
Yes.
like if you find like a really cool infographic or something online to go along with the content, or that's really matching what you're talking about, like what's the best way to use something like that when we don't own it? Do we just credit them or link back to the original site, or do we?
I would say I would say an easy thing to do is to link back to the site for an infographic that explains, for a great infographic about this topic, click here and just bring them there. I mean, you could try to embed it in your blog post. I think it's just, not everything falls under fair use standards, and so that can be hard. I will say that there are some free programs that allow you to create infographics on your own that my team has used. I'll make a note of that maybe I'll send you those links.
Yeah, that'd be good.
But there are so many things that you can do yourself these days if you just have an hour or two to kind of play with something. A lot of these free types of tools. And then setting your blog, so something that I didn't put in here but I think is important to remember when you're setting your strategy, that it's, every blog post doesn't have to be a literary masterpiece or a work of art. So to kind of take that pressure off yourself when you're writing. And so when you set your strategy, like think about the tone that you're going to have in your blog post, that it should speak to the students where they are. So, not a lot of marketing brochure speak, but it can come from you. You can use a professional tone without resorting to emoticons or LOLs or other types of texting abbreviations. That there's a good mix, and so I think that would be important to at least keep in mind when you're putting your strategy together. That when you're reviewing each other's work, that it doesn't have to sound like a piece of marketing collateral that came from the college, and that you can write as if you're talking in your own voice, as a professional talking to students. That it can be a mixture of relaxed and professional, and so it shouldn't feel like you're writing a brochure. So that's just something to keep in mind. I said I'll talk again more when I've got that calendar in front of us. So ways to reuse and repurpose blog content, because one of the great things about having this stuff is that it doesn't have to stay in a blog post. You can use it in other things. You can create some kind of downloadable guide that would be helpful to students. So if you've got 10 great blog posts about orientation, maybe 4 or 5 of them have a common theme that you can put together in a PDF that a student can download. Maybe you can shoot a video. If you've gotten some great testimonials from students, you can recruit them to spend 2 or 3 minutes talking on a video for you. You can beef up a newsletter that you might already be sending out to students. Building an email campaign, updating your catalog. It just all depends on the type. Look at the types of channels that you have and find out how else that blog content can work for you. I can say we have a nursing school in Las Vegas where a lot of our prospects are from California. So we've written a few blog posts about relocating to Las Vegas. And so one of the things that we want to do is take a few of those blog posts and turn it into a guide that says tips on how to relocate to Las Vegas. So it's just a way to take the content that you already have, clean it up or repackage it a little bit differently, and find a new way to offer it to students. Updating your catalog. Let's say that post you wrote about 4 placement tests you might not have to take inspires you to take a look at your section on placement tests in the catalog, and bringing attention certain ones that a student may not have to account for depending on their major or where they fall, if they're a non-traditional student or something like that. So the goal of a blog post doesn't have to just be the blog post. That content should work for you in other ways to make your life easier. And not everyone is going to see your blog post the first time it's published, or they might have missed it on Facebook that day. So finding different ways for that content to resurface is a good thing. Don't feel like you're repeating yourself. And then, right now, you don't have a blog, right? Or what if you can't get the resources together to have a blog? The good news is that all of this content can still be put together. You're not limited by, you can still write these fun types of things without having a blog. They're just going to live in different places. So, going back to the homepage rotation for University College or for your microsites, you can have images that link back to a web page. So if you had the student poll that you wanted to highlight, or the study skills boot camp, you could take any one of the blog post ideas that you have and link to it from the homepage section. You might not have a blog, but maybe you have a news section. You could still write those types of stories and put them in your news section. You just might not have things like comments or a beefy archive, or a lot of categories within your archive. You can group content into sidebar features, and I have an example of what I mean by that. And again, you can write the same kind of content for newsletters that you might already be putting out. So I don't want you to feel discouraged if you don't have a blog that you can use right away. This content is still good, and it can still get out there. And when I talk about sidebar content, I'm looking at that right-hand sidebar right there. Want to see more? View our direct entry guided tour. That was actually a slide deck I put together that lives in SlideShare, but we embedded into the body of a blog post. That blog post is already 2 weeks old, so we want to make sure it's still front and center because it's something that we really want students to download. So not only is it a feature on our rotating, it's a link that you can get to from our homepage, you can also get it on the sidebar here so that it's still front and center when they view the blog, even if they never get to see that blog post. So you can create all kinds of content collections in your sidebar. It could be one thing that you're linking to, or you could build it, have like a call out for 3 different articles that you want to put out. It just depends on the CMS that you have. So again, if you don't have a blog, you can still execute a lot of this stuff. It just is going to look a little different. And so here is the content calendar. So this is here is the actual calendar that we use. The documents that I gave to Eric to share with you also has this kind of brainstorming sheet that you can use. And so this is one of the things that, again, I love Silver Square. They've got great resources. So when you're planning your calendar out, before you even get to the calendar, you can kind of use this as a worksheet. The different channels that you want to make sure you're writing content for. If it is a blog and you want to write 2 times a week, you can just kind of capture that information here. If you have Facebook and Twitter and you know that those are things you want to write content for, you can put that here. It's just kind of like a capture of what you plan to do in a month, essentially. So the first line could say, blog post is the channel, the schedule is once a week, the author, it could just be one person, or you could just write multiple departments, but just getting a format, a feel for what your content schedule is going to look like in the month. And then this calendar, you've got a column for date, channel, author, topic, and format. And I'll say we use this, we plan ahead every month. So we had a content meeting in the middle of August to talk about September. And so what we do is we take all the people who are content contributors on the team, we brainstorm the ideas that we have, we look ahead on the calendar and talk about different events that we know we want to promote, whether we have nurses who had we know that they're going to have a pinning ceremony at one of our schools at the end of the month. We want to make sure that we allow enough time to write that somewhere in the calendar. Other upcoming events that you might have. We have a test deadline. We know we want to write a blog post to make sure everyone has what they need to take the test, or that they remember to register for the test, or some of those more, again, like timeless, longer term blog pieces. A lot of it could be a blog, but again, if you don't have a blog, the channel could be the homepage rotation, it could be a sidebar content, maybe you're planning ahead of time for your newsletter or your magazine, so this doesn't have to just work for a blog. Again, the author could be an individual person or it can be a department, but just so you know who's accountable for filling the calendar that day, a general idea of what the topic is, and then the format could be, it's going to be a list, or you want to create a PowerPoint and use the slide and embed it in SlideShare. You can get a feel for if you have busy seasons or busy pockets within your month, and you can say, orientation is going on, so I know, don't count me for any blog post to go live between X time and X time because I'm going to be busy, or that's a signal to you that you need to write it way ahead of time. But you can work the calendar around everyone's individual needs. And again, you don't have to, if you have a blog, you don't have to publish every day, but just setting some kind of consistent schedule so that your students can expect to see something, whether it's once a week or 3 times a week. And of course you can vary that up a little bit, but what you don't want to do is have 2 posts up this week and nothing next week, and then 3 posts the following week, and then maybe 1. So a calendar can really help you space out and plan ahead what your needs need to be as a team. And then you've got a couple of other columns that you could use for whatever purposes you have. if you know that if you have a blog buddy who's going to review your post, you could have a column for blog buddy, so someone can look at the calendar and say, oh, I know around September 15th I'm going to see something from Amy that needs to be reviewed, or so that you don't have to reach out to every person on the calendar. So again, it's a great resource for just taking all the ideas that you have and putting it on paper. And I will say this changes for us every day, but at least we have a roadmap to start from, and at least we know what is changing and how to move things around, so that we're not waking up on a Tuesday and saying, oh, I need to post something and I have no idea what I'm going to write. Because usually it's 9 times out of 10 your blog posts are going to take more time to plan than that. And we have these with us in our meetings that we can take down notes and ideas. And then at the end of the meeting, we update it and we share it with everybody and put it in a place that everyone can access. And if someone makes a change, we let them know that, check the calendar every day, because that's a living document and it's meant to change over time as life happens. So there it is. So are there any, I know that's a lot of information. Does anyone have any questions? And I know I've also taken this a little bit over.
I think I'm having trouble picturing how you integrate this blog with Facebook. Like, for example, then if you are using Facebook or Twitter, let's say, do you just put the link to the blog on the Facebook page? Is that what you do? Or,
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, they don't have, there are some CMSs that might let you, every time you have a new blog post, it will pull it from WordPress into Facebook, but I think we can do better than that. I think that you might want to frame your post in a different way and just writing a couple of sentences about what they're going to expect in the content. So if the blog post was, the blog title was fall events for orientation, like if you were to just put, you would copy and paste the link into Facebook, but if that's all the text that you gave a student, that's not very, it doesn't really incite them to want to click on the post. So you can say, hey, we just finalized our calendar, click on the link so you can take a look at it. So you're putting your own spin, you're framing what the student is going to get on the link, but essentially you're just taking the link that was published on your blog and dropping it into the calendar. And on Facebook you can also, I would say that you would also drop in, if there was a picture that you included in your blog post, you can upload the picture and then the URL will be part of the picture's description.
The other thing is integrating multiple university colleges' blogs from their microsite, because I can see where you could really tread over into each other's territory a lot. And so from an advisor perspective, they can talk about work-school balance, and in their blog post, I guess, is the call to action to go to the career site, to then read more posts
Student
about
employment, about why you should work on campus.
Yeah. Well, this is why it's so important.
Advising tips for orientation.
yeah, and I can see where, and this is one of the things that Eric's worked really hard with us on in our orientation microsite, is not trying to be the IUPUI website. Because it's
Right.
really easy when you think of orientation to want to orient them to everything. And there is a parking website, and there is a JAGTAG website. We don't have to educate them about those sorts of things. So I'm just wondering, from an organization perspective, should we think more collectively as University College in mapping a calendar as an academic unit, or doing it by microsite?
I think that's really up to you guys. I don't know if I can keep talking about it or if you have feedback.
I would suggest that this is the point of collaboration that you would want. That if I came about and said, okay, we have this WordPress site for University College, volunteers, who wants to write for this, come, and we figure out a calendar of the types of things that could be written about each semester, and then we utilize like keywords to pick them up into your site. So if you wrote something, at orientation, but it included information about academic advising, like it would also pull down into their feed, kind of like we do for the news as well. And so while it's kind of crossing over both areas, that's very pertinent for the students that you're serving.
And I could really see this being much more interesting than the news feed, is replacing that section on the website, is that?
But this could be a great, so if you're having if you have this calendar up and you have a meeting, so you could map it out for the semester, but if you meet once a month and talk about your different ideas, then you could decide, you can address topics that overlap and say, hey, I'll take it this time, but I'll make sure, if you need a link to your page, or if I need to mention an event that you're doing that's similar, or if we need to mention both departments as being co-hosts, that you could work out a lot of that in the content planning, so that you're not surprised a month later to find that 2 posts about the same thing went up within 2 days of each other. So that's why working together and having a calendar that everybody can see is really important.
Well, and for someone who I am not a writer, I can't keep my Facebook page up. I have a Twitter account, but I don't use it. Like, this is not me, you know? Like, I'm
Not
an
a
introvert.
strength.
It's not my strength. There are probably people who have the strength in my office, but
Well, and you could still be.
like, so having something like this where it's not going, oh my gosh, am I doing a bi-weekly thing and I have a list of topics, but when am I going to write this, and my other staff is in multiple other things, you know? So having it where we have some commonalities and all of our resources can work across the board here, I think would be a nice thing, you know, is top 10 advice and tips for transfers, you know? Yeah, like what are things you need to know where,
With that voice.
yeah.
I mean, Bree, when you speak,
Yeah.
you have a voice for this.
Right.
That I always tell Eric, I go, you know, writing a good post for Facebook is kind of poetic. Like, it has to have a certain voice. And for those of us who can't keep up our Facebook sites, we clearly do not have that voice.
And it's about me.
It's about ourselves. So I think that's something that many of us in the unit will struggle with. I mean, it's not that we don't see great use
Right.
and great avenue and structure for our students. It's lovely. This is not what we do.
Right.
Let's talk about it, you know, creating rapport and developing a plan and, you know, helping a student. That's a skill set we all possess, but this is very, very challenging.
And so that's why it's a great, so if there, and I realize this is now keeping over, so if you need to filter out, that's fine, but that's why I think it's really important to find out where your strengths are on the team that you have. So, and some people are friends on Facebook at work and some people aren't. But if you see people, if you do have coworkers on your Facebook feed and you like the voice that they have on Facebook, maybe that's somebody that could help write the little blurb when it goes onto Facebook, but they don't like to write the blogs. Or we get information for blogs all the time from people, and they have no idea that it's going to be used in a blog post. So like a Q&A, I just emailed a list of 6 questions to a clinical lab coordinator at one of our campuses, and so I just gave her all my questions and just said, what's the purpose of a skills lab? What types of things are students doing in there? And you know, 5 or 6 more. And so she wasn't thinking about it from the mindset of a blog post. She was just like, okay, here's the question. She gave me a paragraph on that and a paragraph or 2 on all the others. And now I have a 2-page Word document that I can turn into a blog post. So you can still offer information and not write it as a blog. So again, if you have a team champion who could say, I feel comfortable with this, that I can shoot questions off on email and I can compile it into something. And again, knowing that you can have another person review it, I think it's important to take away the pressure of a blog has to be perfect. That if the goal is to get information to students, that you'll be able to do that. You'll be able to meet the goal that you have, and it doesn't have to be Shakespeare, and it doesn't have to be up for an award. It can be simple and straightforward. If the idea of trying to write about studying in Harry Potter, if the idea of writing about studying in connection to Harry Potter is intimidating to you, then don't do that. Like, don't feel like you have to do that. I just started writing posts like that now in my job, and it's almost been a year. And it is intimidating because it is forcing you to think outside of the box. So stick with the easy stuff at first, and wait until you see what kind of voice you have and what kinds of things you want to write about. But I think overall, again, when you're setting your strategy, write as if you were talking to one student. That don't think about 50 of them or 2,000 of them. Imagine if you were having a conversation with somebody in your office, and just write it out that way. You can edit out the stuff later that doesn't fit, but to just get the information down on paper, just imagine you were having a conversation or a phone call with somebody. And so that might kind of ease that fear a little bit, but you shouldn't think that you had to major in English or be a great writer. Like, there are lots of people who blog who aren't great writers, but still get their point across.
School to write that nothing is your voice. You don't know anything. You cite everything. You have to write from a research perspective, and so to write from my voice, I don't have a voice.
Well, and maybe
a long time ago.
And I think that's okay.
Creative writing.
I think that's okay. Again, just the important thing is just to start, because you won't find your voice until you've written a few blog posts, and then you'll kind of relax into it. But it doesn't have to be gold the first time. And if you go into it with that mindset, it will probably be difficult every time. So just to keep the goal in mind that you're just trying to get information to a student that may not have, give them something new that they didn't know about before. And it doesn't have to be witty, it can just be straightforward, but that student's gonna find it a lot easier as opposed to being buried in a catalog or a 20-page booklet. That it's just a way to get information front and center.
Andrea, one way that someone once suggested for us to get content out of people where, I mean, because, you know, you said you don't have a voice, but I don't believe that. I know you have a voice.
We've worked with you.
Because you speak in a very specific way, especially when you're talking to parents and students. But, so, you know, A, it's using that, and B, he said, you know, instead of telling somebody that they're about to write a blog post or something, just ask them a question through email. So, like, you know, you email Rachel, what are 5 things I could tell transfer students to do when they start, you know, their first week of classes, and have her write you an email back with those things in them. And then, you know, there's cleanup involved, obviously, after you're done doing that. And
So,
Tricking you into answering my blog.
We do that all.
You know, it doesn't
We
need
do
to be
that all the
trickery,
time.
but-
Hi,
We do.
I have information that I would like from my website about your pinning ceremony. Can I send you a few questions on email? I don't even have to tell them what it's for if I'm not going to use their name. I can just say, this is going on our website and we need to get some information up there. Can you fill in the blanks for me? But the clinical lab director that I had, her information was so great. At first I thought it would be more of a standard narrative, and then seeing some of the examples that she used, I decided I didn't want to take her voice away. So I said, do you mind if I frame this as a Q&A from Carol Femia at Northeastern? She's like, nope, just fix up the grammar stuff. Like, but she already did the hard work of getting the information out there, and I can just help her. I'm just helping her clean it up a little bit, but I'm not going to remove her voice from that. I can use the examples that she gave, and again, as long as it's, you know, not LOL like teenager jargon, like a lot of it can stay in. And these lists and these topics, you are the owner of them. So when you're thinking about 5 things you need to know, there's no right list. That can be any 5 things that you want to make a student know. And if you think of 5 more things later, you can do a follow-up and add that stuff again. So don't feel limited that I can, if I say 10 things, like these have to be the 10 be-all, end-all things about orientation. Like, you don't have to think, it can be whatever 10 things are easy for you to talk about.
And if there aren't 10,
There could be
maybe
3.
7 things.
Yeah, there could be 3
And
things.
then next week, it's 3 more things.
Oh, I forgot. No, this was helpful because I need to figure out my rotating homepage pictures and some of the examples you gave just to help me brainstorm. So I was typing some of the things that were in my head while you were saying something. So this was a nice way to declutter out of my office and looking at the data I'm looking at this morning and actually use a little bit of a different brain focus. So this was very helpful. Yeah. So yeah.
Feel free, my offer still stands that if you want to email a question, or if I didn't get to talk about somebody's department, you say, hey, can you send me 10 ideas for my blog? Like, I didn't want to do that in an hour presentation that is now turned into an hour and a half, but I can definitely do that over email for you, or I can talk about how the ideas that I've already shared can be reworked a little bit differently so that you could do them for your department.
That'd be great.
Thank you so much for your time.